The all-new and all-electric Vistiq is a bold move for Cadillac. Not only is it hitting the market just as EV interest in Canada is taking a nosedive, but it's about to be the only three-row this size in the brand's lineup since the XT6 is being discontinued at the end of this year. And that means there's an awful lot riding on this thing, not just for Cadillac, but for its customers too. But the good news is it seems like the Vistiq is up to the challenge. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. I happen to think the Vistiq looks really good and it blends kind of conventional and EV styling really nicely. And personally, I think Cadillac's design language is kind of timeless. If you take a look at this thing, it's tied relatively closely to other vehicles in the lineup. Some of them are quite old and it looks just as much like those as it does some of the more futuristic models in the lineup. It also looks like the smaller optic, and the biggest giveaway there is an actual treatment on the glass here versus the pillars on that thing, but it's that really cool pattern on those rear quarter windows. I think it's super cool and it's unique. You don't see something like that on just about any other vehicle out there from the factory. So I really like it. And it also ties it in with this kind of fake grille up front. Yeah, that's probably the biggest giveaway, that this thing is powered by electrons and not a gas engine, but it's about as close as you could get to a conventional grille on an EV, and I really like the look of it. Okay, look, I know we all have different opinions about styling, and that might be true for the inside, but I really like it, especially this premium luxury version that I'm driving, because it has this awesome blue leather upholstery. I know that might not be for everybody, but I really do like it, and I like the mix of materials in here. It's not just the blue, it's everything else that it's combined with, including this kind of wood grain on the doors. It's got this cool pattern on it as well. There's all these different accents and shapes. Very cool. I also like the shape of this massive 33-inch screen up here, although I will say it's kind of two screens. I know that GM likes to say it's one screen, but there's this gap in between the two of them. Anyways, doesn't really matter. It combines instrumentation as well as infotainment, but be warned, this does not have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and that could be a big sticking point for some people. I know I find it frustrating when I drive GM's EVs. I think the only one you can get still to this day that has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is the Cadillac Lyriq. So kind of the oldest one in Cadillac's lineup of EVs. This thing, as well as the optic, they do not have it because of this Google built-in system. And the glass half full approach is that it forces you to use the integrated Google Maps, which makes an awful lot of sense. But I am being generous because surely that's not the only reason you don't get smartphone mirroring in here. But if you do use Maps through the infotainment system, not only can you pull Google Maps up into the instrument side of this display if you prefer, but it will also give you range estimates when you punch in destinations into the navigation, and it can even precondition the battery if you set the destination as a public charger. That is great. You don't have to go through a different setting when you're on the road. It'll automatically do that as you approach the charger through the navigation, and that I very much appreciate. All right, the one thing I do have to point out, this instrument display, while it looks good, and the interface itself does too, I like this dark theme because it's easy on the eyes. Daytime or night, it doesn't matter. But I don't love the orientation and the configuration of it. And I do have to back up just a second and make sure I point this out. Yes, I do have the driver's seat as low as it will possibly go to accommodate my height. I'm about 6'4". I remind you guys all the time. I also want to say that I know automotive designers and engineers generally do a pretty good job of making vehicles that are sort of one size fits all, or at least most. I mean, there are people like Jody and I that can both get into vehicles are so different in terms of our sizes, and we can both find comfortable seating positions. But this is one of those rare instances where Cadillac's designers and engineers kind of missed the mark. And the problem is with certain views here on the instrument screen, important information gets cut off. So in this view, which is the energy view, which I happen to like because it gives me my range as well as the energy that I'm consuming right now, well, the speedometer is entirely cut off by the rim of the steering wheel. The only way I can see it is if I adjust the wheel really awkwardly so my wrists are kind of crooked and it's not very comfortable. And then the other, maybe more important problem, the head-up display. And yes, that is also lowered as low as it will possibly go. And when I'm sitting upright, I can just see the bottom of the speed. And if I have navigation instructions showing up on the head-up display, I can't see them at all unless I literally duck down. Not only do I feel ridiculous, but I look ridiculous, and it's kind of dangerous. So that is one of those rare misses, and it's one of the reasons why I always tell you guys, make sure, no matter how much you think you love a vehicle on paper, make sure to go drive it first and make sure it works for you. There is nothing worse than getting behind the wheel of a vehicle and realizing it doesn't really fit you physically, and it's an even worse problem if you've already paid for it. And then just getting back to the smartphone issue, well, yeah, there's no Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but there is Bluetooth, of course, and there is a Google Assistant. So you can technically send and receive text messages on the road. But the issue is the big lag between when you tell the Google Assistant that you want to send a message and you dictate that message. Text Will Johnson.
What's the message?
Why does it take so long for Google to send my messages?
I got. Why does it take so long for Google to send my messages? Ready to send it?
Yep.
Sending your message to Will Johnson.
Got it.
To when it actually sends it. There's just this big delay while, I don't know, I guess this system talks to my phone. And that worries me because I feel like people are going to just get frustrated and pick up their phones, and that defeats the entire purpose of these hands-free technologies in the first place. So again, keep that in mind because there are plenty of other EVs out there that do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so you can use your phone on the road the way it's safe to do so, not like this. Anyways, other than that, the entire layout in here is pretty good, although there aren't as many physical controls as I would like. You have this climate screen down here. There's a separate one in the back for rear seat passengers, but I do miss physical controls. I hate relying on screens. Yeah, you really should set it and forget it, but these are just complicated. They're hard to use without actually looking at them. So that part is no good, but everything else in here is, including the use of space. This does have a third row, and it is quite cramped, but that's because it's bolted pretty much directly to the floor, which I think is a result of that kick up because of the electric motor back there, because every version of the Vistiq is a dual motor all-wheel drive system. It's also got the same battery no matter which trim, 102 kilowatt hours, and then you've got those front and rear electric motors that give you that all-wheel drive. They also give you a whole ton of output. Now you get 615 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque, which is a ton, but don't forget, this is an EV. That's a lot different than a gas-powered vehicle. So yeah, those are big numbers, and don't get me wrong, this thing will accelerate quickly. I think Cadillac claims it'll do the 0 to 100 kilometer hour sprint in 3.7 seconds, which isn't much slower than the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing, which is a performance car. That is a supercharged sports sedan that you can get with a manual transmission that we have a video of on the channel from a couple years ago that I would highly recommend that you check out once you are done here. But that thing takes off with just this incredible kick, and part of it is the holistic experience, the sound as well as the feel. In here, because it's silent, it's a lot smoother and more tranquil. And just generally, it suits the vibe of the Vistiq. This thing is very smooth and comfortable. Yes, this one I'm driving does have air suspension, and that helps too. But on that note, I really wish Cadillac didn't put the optional 23-inch wheels on this thing, and I'm not sure they're that much better than the standard 21 or 22-inch wheels, depending on the trim you go with, but The low profile tires mixed with all of that unsprung weight means, as you guys probably just heard and saw, bumps in the road, you really do notice them more than you should in an EV like this one. But other than that, this thing is smooth and dignified, and it's even easy to forget about the way it's powered, which I think is important, not just for EV veterans. If you are new to electrification, it is nice to just kind of drive this thing around and not really worry about range anxiety, not really worry about it's electric instead of gas. This just feels like a crossover, and that is great, and I wish more EVs drove like this one. Now, one last point about the drive, and that's that this one does have rear axle steering. And what that means is at low speeds, like around a parking lot, the front and rear wheels will turn in the opposite direction, up to 3.5 degrees in the back. And that means a tighter turning circle. But then out on the highway, the front and rear wheels turn in the same direction. And that just helps you more smoothly change lanes. It works very well. And speaking of being on the highway, this thing also has the latest version of Super Cruise, GM's hands-free highway drive assist, and it is still the absolute best in the industry. It is super smooth and natural, and it'll even change lanes on its own, either entirely automatically or when you activate the signal, it'll do the job. Very cool. I like the system a lot, and it works on more roads than ever. And it's just more refined. I like that GM has continued to improve the system, and it really shows. General Motors is one of the many automakers to sign agreements with Tesla to use its North American charging system, although the Vistiq does have an older style CCS port up here on the driver's front fender. Now, personally, I don't think it's a big deal because you can get an accessory adapter for about $300, and that way you can hook up to Tesla stations, but there is a major caveat. And that's because older stations in the Tesla network, they use a different communications protocol that cannot speak the same language as non-Teslas like this one. And that means you can only hook up to the newest stations in the network. And in and around Toronto, there really aren't that many of them. Now, either way, whether you're hooking up to a Tesla station or any other type of charger, this thing can hit peak speeds of 190 kilowatts at a DC fast charger. Of course, that's in ideal conditions. Now, this one I'm driving, it has a 19.2 kilowatt onboard charger, and that means it has 483 kilometers of range. If you go with the 11.5 kilowatt charger, you get 491 kilometers. To recap, I like how easy the Cadillac Vistiq is to drive, how it looks, and the mix of materials inside. I don't like that the seating position is awkward for tall drivers, that it doesn't have smartphone mirroring, and that the third row is a bit cramped. Okay, so the only part we haven't covered is how much it costs, and that would be about $95.5 grand for either the luxury or sport trims, and then this premium luxury version is $113.5 grand, and then at the top of the lineup, you have the platinum trim that's $120,000 before tax. No, that's not cheap, especially next to the XT6 that the Vistiq replaces, but really there aren't that many EVs like this out there. If you take a look at the premium segment, there's really only the Lucid Gravity that, yes, has a better use of space and way more range, but it's offered in a single trim right now that starts at $135,000 before extras and taxes. And then on the mainstream market, you have the Hyundai Ioniq 9 that has a bit more range, and yes, it only tops out at about 83.5 grand, but it doesn't feel nearly as special as this thing, especially inside, and that's enough to make the Vistiq more of a calculated risk for Cadillac than an outright gamble.